Ryan, I heard that you were lobbying for this for a while, so thank you so much for that, because it's nice to have a conference that's like a few stone throws away from Charlotte, which is where I live. This was advertised as a single-track conference. You came here, maybe, I don't know where y'all are from, but paid some money to get here, learn about Swift, iOS development, Objective-C, all that kind of stuff. And I have to say that I'm not going to be talking about any of that. So the last time I tried a development talk, it was a complete disaster. I am a developer, but what I'm really passionate about is building not just apps, but building apps that more than you and your mom use. So that's what I'm going to be talking about today. So first, a little bit about myself. I'm Jeremy Olson, at @JerOlson on Twitter, and you probably didn't know that American Gothic was actually a painting of my wife and I. My wife's in the back there. And I'm also super excited because 2 weeks ago we had our first little daughter. And she's also here because she wanted to learn about Swift. So that's kind of me. I live in Charlotte. And so now my company is Tapity. And Tapity is a small app development company. We do our own apps. We do a little bit of consulting too. But I started Tapity about 5 years ago while I was in college at UNC Charlotte. And let me just walk you through a few of the apps we have. Ours is the app we just launched a couple months ago. It's a time tracking app, so not the craziest thing in the world. But we're super excited because it was one of the few business apps that was able to surpass Angry Birds in the charts at 5 times the price, at least for a day. So that was cool. Then this is Grades. This is the app that started it all. When I was in college, I built this, and it was just insane that Apple gave us an Apple Design Award for it. So that was pretty awesome. And the next app is Languages, and it's an offline translation app that we built with Sonico Mobile. They're the guys behind iTranslate. And that was super cool because it was very international launch. It was got up to be number 5 in the U.S. and number 1 in a bunch of countries like France, overall in the charts. So that was an awesome experience. Also, Apple gave that the best of 2012 for Intuitive Touch. It was pretty cool. So, point being, we've released a few successful apps, and I'm sure we all wonder. When I started out, just wondering, how do people like, the people behind Clear, the people behind Tweetbot, how do they just consistently build successful apps one after the other? And, starting out, I kind of thought, well, it's some kind of magic. It's, just kind of pixie dust. These guys just can do it. But there's actually principles, there's repeatable steps behind the things, behind making successful apps. And so that's what I want to talk about. So the first kind of thing, and I've got these little tweetable takeaways. So if you want to tweet them, it's up to you, but that's really just the title. These are just little takeaways that I'll have throughout the talk. The first one is learning from failure is infinitely more efficient if you also learn from success. This is something that I learned early on when I was starting out because we often are told that failure is really good. You get out there, get your apps out there, and fail quickly, fail often. But I haven't heard too many times that you need to learn also from success, and that's what I started out doing. So when I started my company Tapity, I started building my first app. I actually created a blog, tapity.com, and it was labeled "How to Build Successful iPhone Apps." I had never done it, but I was determined to learn how to do it, and so I started looking at people like Tap, who back in the day, they were big, they're behind Camera Plus and everything, but back then they were one of the big indie developers that was doing really well, again and again and again. I looked at what they were doing and just kind of learned the principles and put them together and started applying them to my own app, Grades, which was my first app. And by doing that, Grades wasn't like a crazy runaway success, but it was number 1 in education, and Apple featured it and a number of other things, and that was my first app. So my semi-failure was a lot more efficient because I learned from other people's success. So that's what I really encourage you to do, is look at the people who are really doing well out there, and we really need to, because indie development is really hard, or just building apps is really hard, and so it's really good to learn from each other. So I'm just going to walk you through the process that we kind of go through to build successful apps. And these are fairly generic, but this kind of gives an outline of the talk. So the idea, we're going to talk about validating your idea, design, how do you create a delightful design that's going to engage users, development, coding, and then the launch and marketing. So those are the things we're going to talk about. Basically everything non-technical. All right, so the idea. And forgive me, I recently installed a GIF keyboard on my phone, and ever since then I've been addicted to GIFs. So this is kind of how most ideas pan out. It sounds like a good idea to start out with, but you end up in the dirt. So, sorry guys, I'm gonna forgive me ahead of time because there's gonna be more of these for each major section. So how do you validate your idea before you actually build it? So I'm just gonna give a few principles. One is do something that you can do better than anyone else. So figure out, okay, what are my resources? What are my unique skills? What is my background? Who are the people that I know, my connections? What is something that I can build better than most other people? And so that's a great way to start out. And part of that also is that you have passion for what you're doing, so scratching your own itch. So that's kind of the foundation. It's something you can do better than anyone. Second one is if you can't explain your idea in one simple sentence, it's probably too complicated. So I've heard lots of ideas. People pitch me all the time about apps, and they're going for paragraphs and paragraphs, and I still have no idea what it does. And I'm sure you all have encountered the same thing.
You do for cats.
Yes. So, or if you can tell what it does, you have no idea why anyone would want to do that. So here's something that Apple does. Apple internally does this. They also encourage us to do it. They create this kind of definition statement. It tells you who the app is for, and in simple words, what it does and why that's valuable. So grades shows college students what score they need to aim for on their next exam. It's a fairly simple thing. You can understand it. If I tell a college student about that, I can easily know if they're interested or not. And that's what you kind of want to do, is create the sentence that you can just tell any random person and get some feedback. So before you've designed anything, before you've developed anything, you can just go around with this sentence and see if it's clicking with people. And if they don't understand it, or if it just doesn't seem valuable to people, it might not be a great idea. So clearly valuable. Those are the two key things you want in this sentence. It's got to be clear what it does, and that function has to be clearly valuable to people. Does it fill a void? All right, so this seems kind of weird because there's like over 1 million apps on the App Store, right? So it's like, how can you fill, are there any voids left? It seems like there aren't. But actually, there are. There might not be a void. You probably aren't going to be able to build an app that's completely unique. It does something that no other app does. That's very rare. Maybe you can, but generally it's going to be more things like, I'll just give you an example with Hours, which is our latest app. We found that there are tons of time tracking apps out there, but none of them really focused on the user interface to make it a really engaging experience and focusing on the human problems, like forgetting to track your time. Like they have the function to track your time, but what if I forget to track my time? And things like that. So we saw a void there that we wanted to fill ourselves because we kept track of our own time. So that's what you're going for. And there's different kinds of voids, whether it's the user interface, there's a category, there's lots of apps, but the user interface isn't great, or some other way you can innovate. Money. So money's kind of important because it's what keeps you building apps, right? If your apps don't make money, it's a little bit hard to keep doing it. You can do it just for fun, but it's nice to also be able to make a living off of it. So I've got this little chart that kind of shows different categories of apps. There's three of these categories are how you can build successful apps, and one category is where most apps are, and those apps are not successful, unfortunately. So you've got hit apps over on the top left, That's pretty obvious. It's like cheap apps that they've got to get a lot of downloads to make a significant amount of money, and they go for the mass market. Apps like Clear, it's a to-do list. Almost anybody would use a to-do list, right? So they can get a lot of volume if they make a great app. So that's how you do it for hit apps. For premium niche over here on the opposite side, those are apps probably more like ours. They sell for $5 to $10 or maybe more, $20, $50, $100 for some apps. They find a niche that will pay that finds the function valuable enough that they'll pay that amount of money, and there's enough people in that niche. So that's how you do it in that category. And so ours is kind of in that category, and we found that there's enough time trackers that are willing to pay $10 for an app that we can make it a successful business. Premium hits is kind of the sweet spot if you can do it. It's very rare, but it's apps that these are the apps you see in the top grossing charts. They get a ton of volume, and they also make a lot of money per user. So you might see, if you look at the top grossing charts, it's mostly these freemium games that have crazy addicting in-app purchases. So I've heard that some of these games are making like, I don't know, $30 on a user, and it's a free app, but they're making $30 on an average user, and I don't know if that's right, but like something crazy. And so they're making a lot of money per user, and they've got a ton of users. So that's possible, but it's very rare. Then most apps, unfortunately, they're in this other quadrant where they've got a limited appeal. It's not universal appeal like the one above. Limited appeal, and they can't charge more than $1 or a few dollars because people don't find enough value in it. And that's where most apps lie, and that's where you kind of get stuck, because it's like you put your app out there, it's a niche app, you sell it for $1, hoping that there's 5 million people in the market, so if I can get 10% of those, then I can make some money off of a $1 app. But that math usually doesn't work out. So it's a niche, and it's also inexpensive. That doesn't work out. So kind of to go along with this, start thinking about your apps not as apps and just how do I make money off of the App Store. Think about your apps as businesses. This is what we need to start doing. Actually, I've talked to a number of people, like the guys behind Clear, and a number of people paid apps are actually getting a lot tougher these days because people are downloading more free apps and things like that. So we're having to find other business models other than just selling your app for 99 cents. Actually, the whole 99 cents, like crazy, trying to get a hit for 99 cents, that model is kind of dying because it's hard to get enough volume with paid apps these days to make a 99-cent app worth it. So, but the general idea is start thinking about your app as a business. So that might not even involve users paying for it. So for example, for ours, something we're thinking about now is, it's a great paid app, it's making money, but how do we extend that? How do we make it a real business? And one of the ways is we make it, put a web backend on it, and we sell it to businesses rather than consumers. So it's not actually the user of the app who's paying for it, it's the business. And you can make a lot of money that way, because businesses have deeper pockets than consumers. So, and whether it's partnerships, things like that, think about your app as a business, and think more creatively about your business models. So that was the idea. Now on to the design. Really, forgive me. So this is what interaction design is trying to avoid. Your users just confused and not knowing how to use your app. It's got to be easy to use, and so that's what we're trying to do in interaction design. I'm going to talk about two kind of design topics. Interaction design is the first one. Don't Make Me Think is a great book by Steve Krug. I highly recommend it if you want to learn about design. It's kind of a good starter. And it's kind of in the web world, but it really applies to apps. And that's what you're trying to do. So you don't want your users to have to think about how they're using your app. It needs to be intuitive. So a few ways you can do that. One is focus. So if you look at these two examples, you might be able to imagine which one is more focused. Any ideas?
It's the one on the left.
Yeah, probably the one on the left, right? So I don't even know the name of this app. I don't think it might not even be on the App Store anymore. But
Looks like I was 5.
so it has like has lots of great features. I'm sure this guy had a ton of, spent a lot of time, he brainstormed and he got all these features that users might potentially want in a to-do list app. But he included all of them. He had no constraint on what he was going to include, what he wasn't going to include, and it ends up like this. Whereas Clear, I feel like, is one of the perfect examples. Love it or hate it, it's an awesome example of constraint. The designers were just so focused in what is the bare minimum we can do in a to-do list app, and they did that, and it's one of the most popular to-do list apps there is, because a lot of people just want a to-do list, just a list of items. And they did it in a really great way. And since they were able to focus on it, they were able to solve those simple problems in a way that nobody had ever imagined. And so that's what you want to do. Focus on a few problems and just nail it and do it in a really innovative way. Great design is more about saying no to good ideas than it is about generating them. So you might think designers are creative people, so they need to as a designer, you need to just be able to think about all these crazy, awesome ideas. Actually, as a designer, it's more important to learn how to say no to the good ideas, because it's all these good ideas that help you lose focus and that cause you to lose focus. It's never a bad idea. They're all good ideas, but they cause you to lose focus. So you need to learn how to say no. No, we don't need this feature for this version. Let's just do it with the bare minimum and see where it goes.
Squirrel. Sorry, I'm not trying to be obnoxious.
No worries. So think like a human. This sounds kind of obvious. We're all humans, right? But actually, most of the time, especially the developer mind, I know because I'm a developer as well, we start thinking about things very technically, and even our interfaces, it kind of goes right into our interfaces. So we have a database, and we make our app kind of model our app interface according to that database, or whatever our coding model is. And so that's what you don't want to do. You want to think like a human. Here's a good example. So Red Laser, this is back in the day. This kind of dates my slides, but or some of my slides. But this app was one of the most popular apps in the App Store, in the early days of the App Store. But this was the first version, and this version didn't do very well. It did relatively well. It got featured on TechCrunch. It got featured by Apple, but then it kind of just slumped off in sales. It never got to #1 or anything like that. So this interface, Red Laser, you've used tons of apps like this, but this version, you took a picture of a barcode, then it sent that to the server, and it got back a product, right? And you did something with it. This was not thinking like a human, because that's not how barcodes work in the real world. So that app, like I said, it got featured and everything, but it kind of just slumped off. The next version of their app, they decided, okay, what are we doing wrong? And so they redesigned it where the main change of this whole interface was just this little thing. It's not taking a picture of a barcode, but you put your camera over the barcode, it goes beep, and it automatically gets the product. And just that little change caused the app to go viral, because that's how humans think. It's that's how a barcode scanner works, and so it kind of captured people's imaginations and how they use barcodes. And it's wow, this is just like a barcode. And that's what caused this app to be #1 for months. By itself, by the way. It didn't get featured by Apple and all those other sites until it already had gotten to #1. So it was all word of mouth. People were just sharing it. Okay. Don't make me work. Oh, this is a big one. Huge, just common mistake we make. And that is forcing users to work before we give them any kind of value. So I love this app lift. I think this is an older design of it, but I'm not sure if they changed this, but you had to sign up for the app before you got any kind of value of it. You barely even know what it does. And some apps have to do this. Some apps, they're like Facebook. It's you've got to be able to log in before it's really any value. But a lot of the big brands can do that. But a lot of the smaller brands, like probably yours, you don't have the kind of brand recognition and the ability to just say, oh, it's Facebook, so I'll just sign into my Facebook account. They're probably going to have to create a new account, and that's work. That's the kind of thing you want to avoid. You want to be able to give users value before they have to work. So that's not saying don't make them work at all, but limit their amount of work as much as humanly possible, and show them the value of it to where when you do have work, they're willing to do it. So work like crazy so that the user doesn't have to. So that might be, maybe there's a field where they have to type something in. If there's a way for you to do the work and actually have some like autofill technology where they type a few words and then tap the correct result rather than having to type the whole thing, that's work you're saving them. So anything you can do to save them work, sometimes it takes you a lot of hours, and so it's kind of, for you it's a lot of work. Sometimes that's what you have to do to create a great experience. Second thing, ask users for information only when they understand the value of giving you that information. So things like login screens, what I tell people is, if you possibly can avoid not having it at the very beginning, please do that. Let them explore the app, and when they get to a point where you need their information, like maybe they need to add a friend or do some functionality that requires a login, that's when you ask them for their information, if at all possible. Conventions. So conventions matter. Conventions are things that are in the user interface that are kind of standards. iOS has conventions, Android has conventions, so it's just what users kind of expect. This user interface is a bad user interface because it doesn't follow conventions. So I bet a lot of you don't even understand like what's going on here. And that's, it's pretty simple functionality actually. It's really simple. But these buttons at the bottom, usually the done button and the cancel button are right at the top, where that huge, weird edit grade thing is. And so it's just not where people expect to see things. And so people get confused and flustered. So this is the exact same functionality, but using, this again dates this slide, but it's iOS 6 conventions. It's not that it's not in its own style. It is in its own style, but it is following conventions. So you have the cancel and save button at the top, keyboard, standard keyboard, that kind of thing. Standard controls, but in a custom way. So you can still customize things, but as much as possible, at least know why you're breaking convention before you break it. Sorry?
I was just gonna say, I got fired from my first programming job because I was working on an iOS app where they made like a fake tab bar down at the bottom, so it looked exactly like a tab bar, but you click on something and you go to another screen and it would be lost and you had absolutely no idea where you're supposed to be going. And they absolutely could not do that because the users wouldn't know what to do. Like, they totally know what to do, they're pushing the buttons and you don't see them using the app, but you don't see them after they get there and they don't know how to get back to where they were.
Great example. So, the use of tab bars is a great example. Like you might use the actual user interface element of a tab bar, but then it behaves in a completely different way, like what you were saying. Yeah. And that confuses users, and they don't know how to get around. So you want to avoid that. Usability testing. Do usability testing. I can't tell you enough that you need to do usability testing. It's revolutionized their apps because when you show it. And I'm not saying you don't need eye scanners and this crazy stuff. Don't get intimidated by all that. There's a lot of theory behind usability testing. If all you can do is just show your app to some friends, or show a mock-up to some friends as you're building it, or take someone off the street and show it to them, and maybe ask them to do a certain common task or something like that. It could be as simple as that, and you will get amazing insights from that. So don't make it too complicated. But one thing, just a little tip for usability testing, don't have restraint when you're doing it so that you don't do the task for them if they're confused. Figure out why they're having trouble by just letting them struggle with it for a while. Don't tell them the answer at all costs. Because when you do that, then you've lost the potential for insight. So do usability testing. What is this? Best designers aren't necessarily the most brilliant ones, but the ones who relentlessly exhaust the possibilities to find the obvious solution. So I know some great designers. Mike Matas is one from Facebook. He's in Facebook. He designed the Our Choice app. Designers and what I hear about them, a lot of these great designers is in that they're so brilliant and they find these solutions. Like the first time, it's like, man, they come up with these creative solutions. but it's that they keep iterating. It's like they're not satisfied with finding a good solution. Once they find a good solution, they're like, great, okay, but let's keep going, let's keep iterating, let's see if we can find a better one. So that's a huge thing. A lot of the best designers, you just don't give up until you find the solution where people are just like, duh, that's the way to do it. And that's what we really want to hear from your users. It's like, why hasn't anyone done it this way before? This is like, duh. It's like the iPod. Why didn't anyone use a click wheel before? Or anything, stuff like that. It's just a duh moment. That's what you want. Okay, so again, forgive me. But so you want to make your design easy to use, but it's also needs to be fun to use, have an emotional connection. So you want your users to do this, right? When they use your app. Usable isn't good enough anymore. You can have a completely usable app, but if users don't have an emotional connection, they won't share it as often, and it's going to be harder for you to succeed. And actually, Apple really looks for apps that are really emotional, not just work well. So, how do you do this? Personality. Personality is huge. So, a person that doesn't have a whole lot of personality, it's hard to love them, it's hard to hate them, right? Someone with a lot of personality, you either love them or hate them. So apps like Clear. Clear has a lot of personality. They're very opinionated in their design. And it's very, very different. And they use sounds, they use gestures and different things to make it very unique. And I know a ton of people that hate it. I know a ton of people who absolutely love it. That's what you want. You want to create some kind of emotion. So you got to have a personality. Aspects of personality. Number one, kind of the most superficial level, making it pretty. And that's what a lot of people consider what design is making things pretty. This is just a very small aspect of what design is. This is an app called Paper. Beautiful app, very pretty app, and that's a big reason why it has some personality. Touch. So Apple realized that touch is magic. That was what was so unique about the iPhone, is that they treated touch as something that, as much as possible, you don't want them to feel like they're using a computer. You want users to feel like they're interacting with physical objects. That's why when you swipe your finger, there's a physical effect. It actually, it slows down. It doesn't just stop, when you swipe your finger, but it slows down over time. That's part of making touch magical. It's making it feel like you're interacting with physical objects on the screen. And even though iOS 7 supposedly doesn't, it's not kind of gotten rid of skeuomorphism, you still have so many skeuomorphic effects like that. And actually, our apps have gotten even more physical feeling with a lot of the things that Apple's given us with the kind of physics engines and things like that. They actually have a physics engine built into iOS, which is pretty awesome. So one great tool that I recently found that I used in hours is called Pop. Have any of you all heard of Pop? Okay. Exactly. This is terrible, all right? Because Pop is this amazing tool that Facebook actually recently put out. Have you all heard of Facebook's Paper app? Paper? It's also, and so this was the framework they built to use the app Paper, and Paper just has some really cool stuff going on. It's also the guys behind Our Choice. They're the guys who made this, and they use the same framework in Our Choice. Beautiful app. And so let me show you just some of the things I did with this framework in Hours. So you've got these kind of little bouncy animations, lots of, there's just kind of, it feels all kind of physical, kind of all just, the timer pulsates a little bit while it's going. Some of the effects are subtle, but it creates this experience where you feel like you're manipulating some physical objects on the screen. And Pop, it doesn't, you can do all these things, with Apple stuff, but I found that Pop just made it a lot easier to do a lot of this stuff, and so you actually do it in your apps, which is important. Okay, so that's Pop, and I highly recommend you all check it out. Don't overdo it. It's easy to overdo animation, especially as developers. But that's another area we need to have constraint, is to be able to tone your animations down. Don't do like crazy stuff that completely distracts users. Make sure that all your animations actually engage the user in what's going on. So for example, when you tap one of these blocks, as you saw earlier, it expands out. That actually tells a story that says that this block, when you tap that, that block is becoming something else and you're able to edit it. And so that it's not purely superficial and for looks. It's actually functional. Words, something that we often overlook. Words are extremely powerful. In fact, you can make someone's day if you use the right words in your app. Think about you're writing an alert message or an error message, right? You often don't think about it. It's like, oh, I'm just going to say 404 or whatever. But it's those error messages that say something crazy, something you didn't expect. So they do provide the function. They tell you what's going on, but they do it in a way that's funny or witty or whatever it is, and it just it's like, whoa, they didn't have to do that, but it's fun. And so this is just an example in grades. If someone's on this screen for a while, they don't know what's going on, this guy kind of pops up and tells them what they need to do. And I've got emails from people, I know it's kind of quirky, what's up, show me what syllabus looks like, but college students responded to it. College students really liked it, and I got emails saying, oh, those guys are awesome, I love those little pop-up messages. And so use text to convey emotion. It's a really powerful tool. Don't miss out on an opportunity, whether it's an alert, an error message, to delight your users. Every interaction with your app should be delightful in some way. Status. So this is kind of something that's easy to do wrong, which is, you tap something on the app and there's no response. That makes your app feel broken. So something you need to make sure you do to always make it feel like your app is still alive and they're still using it and it's working is always show them what's going on. Show them the status, whether it's a loading bar, a little streaming thing like in Tweetbot. Make sure you convey status. Sound. Sound is a very underutilized tool. There's certain apps like Tweetbot, Clear, that use it in a really interesting way. We tried to use a little bit in ours, but that was the first app we tried it in. So it's really underutilized. And sound, think of it, it's one of the most emotional tools that we have in our toolbox. If you think about watching Star Wars without the soundtrack, it'd be terrible. The soundtrack is so much what Star Wars is all about. And since, it can be the same with your app, where the soundtrack, that can convey a lot of the emotion in your app and the feel of what your app is. All right, building it. So this is what you came to this conference for, right? Development. Well, that's what the rest of the conference is about. So I'm not going to talk about it, except for one thing. That is that design isn't signed off until it ships. Some of the most crucial iteration happens in the coding stage. So this is from my experience. We can design an app, pixel perfect mockups and stuff. But if you think that you can just hand that to a developer and let them go at it and that's going to be great, you're probably wrong. We found that so much of the delightful details that I was talking about before and how you convey all this emotion, some of it's just hard to think about unless you're using the app for yourself and you've got some level of coding. So a lot of those details for us came in the coding stage. So don't stop designing when you're coding. That can be where a lot of the breakthroughs come. All right, marketing and launch. So that's how most launches go, right? You're hoping for the best, but doesn't really work out. You put it out there, you put so much effort into it, you're so happy about it, you use it yourself, it's amazing, and you put it out there, and 5 people download it on the first day, and it's your mom, it's your brothers and sisters, and it's your best friend, right? So that's how do you avoid that? How do you get a launch that actually works? So here I'm going to first start with the stuff that most people will tell you. And these are kind of the basic buzz building tips that you kind of need to do. It's kind of essentials. One of them is write viral content. So content marketing is huge. And by the way, I think all my tips are basically things you can do for free that you can do yourself, or and things you really should try to do yourself if you can. And they don't cost money. So writing viral content, this is something that I did with ours a lot. I wrote several articles that generated tens of thousands of views and got lots of signups for our mailing list. So how do you create viral content? One thing is being in the moment, like writing things that are happening right now. So iOS 7 came out. This crazy new user interface paradigm. Believe it or not, we were still working on hours back then. In fact, we were working on hours a while before that. And we just released it yet. We were working on it for a long time. So we had to make the transition. We didn't want to release an iOS 6 app for iOS 7. So I wrote an article about how we redesigned the app for iOS 7. That got on, I think, Hacker News and a bunch of stuff and went viral and got tons of signups to our mailing list. So that's one way. But this is just something you should be doing anyway. It's just writing content. Writing and kind of having a voice in the community, because this has other benefits that I'll talk about later. Social media, basics, Twitter, Facebook, there's all kinds of stuff online about it. I'm not going to cover it too much, but it's having a presence on these things like Twitter, having an account, so that your app can be referenced basically on these mediums, and there's also, they can be powerful if you learn how to use them. Teaser website, this is something I always do for our apps. Maybe a few months before launch, you come out with a teaser website, has some engaging content on there, gets people excited on the app, and has a mailing list thing so people can sign up for your mailing list. Create a video. Sometimes people don't release their videos until the app is released, but sometimes people release it earlier to build more buzz. It's hard to make videos that rival like Clear's video. That was an amazing video, but videos like Clear's video got viewed just hundreds of thousands of times, built tons of buzz for them. And so video can be a powerful tool. But don't think you have to go to like that kind of standard. I mean, you could spend tens of thousands of dollars making a video. You probably don't have that kind of money. So even it's maybe showing a part of your app that is special or unique, and just a little clip, and it's not necessarily even a full video. But it can be powerful, because videos convey emotion and can get people excited. Run a beta test. You should be doing this anyway, but it is a marketing tool because you're getting users that are invested in your app. It's when you've got 50 beta testers, 100 beta testers, these are people that are going to be giving you feedback, and you're going to be implementing that feedback, hopefully. And so they're going to get excited about that and feel like they were actually part of making this app great. So guess who's going to be the first people to write reviews on the App Store when the app comes out? Guess who's going to be the first people who share the app when it comes out? It's your beta testers. So it's a powerful marketing tool. And believe me, those first reviews are extremely crucial. So what's the number one goal of all of that stuff that I just mentioned? It's building a mailing list. Because if you don't have a mailing list, it's like you've got all this buzz that it's kind of just all over the place. And when it comes time to launch, you don't really have that bottled up. What you want to do is bottle up all the buzz into your mailing list where people sign up. So the people that are interested in it at the time, they sign up. That way, when you launch, pop, you've got one big explosion rather than just scattered buzz all over the place. Someone excited about your app 2 weeks ago when they heard something about it, but if they don't see it when the app comes out, then that buzz wasn't really very helpful for you, because you want it to all happen at the same time, which I'll talk about later. All right, so those were kind of the tips that you just kind of need to know. So now, how do you do this? So this is a number of the prominent places. This was mainly the sites that featured hours. I think Pando Daily didn't feature hours, but a lot of these. So how do you do this? How do you get all these sites to feature you? But these are kind of some of the big sites that feature our apps over the last 5 years. And you want as many of them to feature you as possible all at once. How do you do that? And some people think, well, I have this kind of magic wand that I just get people, TechCrunch or the next web, it's easy. But there are actionable things you can do to do this. I started out as nobody. Like, nobody knew about me, nobody knew about my apps. I was just like anybody else out there. But somehow I was able to get all these sites to feature us. So how do you do that? So now we're talking about the secret stuff. So this is the stuff that you probably won't hear as much. Marketing and concentrated blasts. So that's extremely crucial in the App Store especially, because the App Store is unique in that it has these top charts, right? That's a huge reason of how you can get your apps to go viral or kind of get an extra boost, is you get your apps on the top chart, and then that kind of has a snowball effect. Is that people look on the top charts, and so more people download the apps, and it goes higher in the top charts, so more people see it, It goes on and on and on. That's what you want to do in a launch. So the app rankings, which is how you get on the charts, that is based on a window of a few days. So maybe, I forget what the exact number is, maybe 5 or 6 days, right? So that accounts, there's a few things that it takes into account, but the number one thing is downloads, right? So you want to get as many downloads as humanly possible in that 5-day period, or hopefully as much as possible in the first day to really kick your launch off. So you need to have a launch blast. And all your and a lot of your marketing, you want to be in these blasts. Whether it's the first launch of your app or an update, you want to have these major kind of events to where you can get your app high in the charts. So that means the marketing has to start day one. You can't think that you can release an app and then start thinking about marketing. Oh, how am I going to market it now that it's out? At that point, it's really hard. So marketing needs to start right now. And that's not just the activities that I just mentioned. It's other stuff that I'm going to talk about. And the number one thing is this. It's all about making friends. So that might sound a little bit weird because we're talking about marketing. But marketing can actually be a genuine exercise. It doesn't have to be sleazy. It doesn't have to be weird or spammy. Marketing can be a genuine exercise of making friends. And this isn't just for your first launch. This happens if you do this over time. Then you've got a huge pool of people that you know and that you're friends with that are going to help you throughout your app business. So who you want to make friends with? Sounds kind of weird, but influencers in your niche. So if you're building a time tracking app, it's maybe business people. Or people that influence other business people. And if you're building a app for students, maybe it's people who can influence students, like universities, influencers in universities, or things like that. So who are these influencers? You need to find them. Influencers in the Apple community. So it could be influential developers, influential designers in the Apple community, people in the Apple community pay attention to. People who have a voice. Journalists. This is kind of the obvious one. But one thing is that I had to make a breakthrough of is when I was starting to think about marketing, I was thinking about, man, I really need to get featured on TechCrunch. How do I get featured on TechCrunch? How do I get featured on the Next Web? How do I get featured on Mac Stories? But what I didn't realize or didn't think about, is that these sites are run by actual human beings. Like, it's not this black box. It's not like this I need to get featured on TechCrunch. I need to get featured by Ellis Hamburger on The Verge. He's an actual person, an actual journalist. Cold calls, you can get some press that way, but it's really hard. What you want to do is you want to get in touch with the people who actually write the articles or write the stories. So, Apple. This is kind of the Holy Grail. It's not easy to do, because Apple can be protective of their people sometimes, but it is possible. And so you want to get to know the people at Apple. Because they're the people who are going to be featuring your apps. And that can be a huge boost. So, tips on how to do this. Some people call making friends networking. I don't really like that word. I don't like the word contacts, and essentially they are, but I like friends because eventually that's the goal. Is you want to make genuine relationships with people. So list the influential people. That's the first step. If you're going to make friends with someone, you need to know who they are. So find all those different categories of people I mentioned. Find them, find out who they are, and list them out. And what I did, I made Twitter lists of all these people. So I had a Twitter list of Apple employees, a Twitter list of influential Apple designers, that kind of thing. And I would follow those lists on Twitter and just kind of always monitor them. So monitor the list and see what they're saying, see what they're interested, see what they're talking about. And then you find opportunities to don't spam them. Like this is the number one. I see so many developers doing this. They find an influential person. We've never been in a time before this that you can have so much access to the influencers in an industry. Everybody's on Twitter. Like, everybody who's in tech is on Twitter, and or at least a lot of the influential people. And so you can mention them today, and they'll probably see it. So there's never been a time where you've had this kind of access to people, but you don't want to ruin that relationship, because you can easily do that with just a spammy tweet. Say, hey, Walt Mossberg, I've got this awesome app, you should check it out. That's not how you start a relationship with someone, is by spamming them with something. So be cool, talk to them about things that they're interested in. Give to them. So give and you shall receive. Think about their lives. What are their life like as a journalist, for example? So I'm a journalist. I really want to advance my career. I want to write articles about awesome apps. I like validation of my writing. So when someone says, Ellis Hamburger, man, that article you wrote about, the review of paper was awesome. Like, I really enjoyed how you did this and this and this. They like that. That's how I got followed by Ellis Hamburger, who's a writer for The Verge. They're probably the #1 app writer. And he's since put me in a bunch of stories. But now we're good friends. We've met in person and all that. But it started by me saying, hey, really enjoyed, and I genuinely did enjoy his article. So it wasn't like I was lying. But just taking advantage of those opportunities and saying, hey, I really like that. Maybe it's for someone who's maybe an influential designer in the industry. He wrote a blog article, and you really enjoyed it. So I'm not saying to do things that you don't mean. But when you see an opportunity, you see someone who you wrote an article, you really liked it, why not just mention them on Twitter and say, hey, really enjoyed your article for this, and that reason. Or maybe you write your own blog post that talks about their article and adds something to it. People read that stuff. Like, if someone writes about an article that I wrote, includes a quote from me or something, yeah, I'm going to read it because I've got an ego. So do cool stuff. That's kind of the basis of a friendship is respect, right? And so you've got to be, you can't make friends with people who are, they're influencers in the industry if you're not doing genuinely cool stuff. Your apps need to follow all the things that I mentioned earlier. Great design, delightful, that kind of thing, and you need to be out there talking about it. Have a voice. Like I said, having a blog, being on Twitter, all those kind of things. Think about this in the long term for long-term relationships. Don't think of, I just need this guy's article this time. It's all about cultivating long-term relationships. So if someone doesn't write an article about you, maybe I've had situations where a journalist is like, oh yeah, that's an awesome app. I'm going to try to write about it. And then, and so I'm like, oh man, I can get on The Verge. That's great. I'll have another article. And then it doesn't happen because his editor didn't think it was appropriate or whatever happened, whatever it is. So you could be bitter about it because you missed an article on The Verge, or you can just say, oh, completely understand, and it's all about building the long-term relationships, because since then the author has written about me numerous other times. So think about long-term. This is a great quote from a good friend of mine, David Barnard. There are some really cool people in this industry. If all you do is beg for coverage, you're missing out on getting to know some great folks. So this is what I'm talking about. It's all about just getting to know these great folks who are in our industry. And so this kind of marketing is not, I don't know, it might sound manipulative, but that's not what I'm trying to get at. I'm not trying to get you to manipulate people. I just wanted to get you to know that these are people. So it's all about getting to know these people. That's the best kind of marketing, at least for me, from my experience. So where are these people? They're on Twitter, like I mentioned earlier. If you're trying to build apps, you need to have a Twitter account. Be active on Twitter, engage these people on Twitter, and like I said, in cool ways and not spammy ways. And answer their questions. Someone has a development question. You might, maybe they're a designer. They're just starting out in development. But you probably haven't answered their development question. And so that's a great place to answer them. And eventually, after you talk to them a few times, they might start following you. So having a voice like your own, this is the Tapity blog. Having a blog, having a voice, that's super important if you want to be kind of a force in the industry. You've got to have your own voice. Conferences, huge. So things like this, and then on a larger scale, things like Worldwide Developers Conference, is most of these people are at those kind of conferences. Whether they're actually signed up or whether they're just hanging out, they're there. And so that's one way I found. Oftentimes, since I'm in Charlotte, North Carolina, there's not a ton of these people in Charlotte, North Carolina. But I'll meet them virtually on Twitter and then solidify the connection when I go to these conferences. We meet up. And the cool thing is, if you get to know one influencer, and this is my experience, you go to a conference and hang out with them, he'll introduce you to 10 others. And then you start getting to know other people. So, and that personal connection at a conference is a lot better than a virtual connection. So, even just sending out emails. Like I said, someone writes an article that you like. Send them an email, a detailed email about why you liked it or your thoughts on it. You'll start, maybe they won't recognize you when you see them next, but after you do that a few times, you start making these connections, then it becomes easier to contact them later. The art of the pitch. So this is talking about cold calls, but even sometimes when you have a warm door, maybe as a journalist, how do you pitch them? But this also is for kind of cold calls, because you do need to do cold calls too. I found you do get articles that way as well. So this is an example of an email for languages, which is one of the apps that we did. I won't read it to you. Let's see, or maybe I. Now, you just get an idea of the structure of it. It's basically a description of the app in a few sentences, two or three sentences max, maybe a bullet point list. You might have a bullet point list of a few features. But then the details that journalists really care about: what's the price, what's the launch date, where's the video? Because people, they're not going to try your app before they see a video, generally, especially if they don't know you. So they're not going to go on test flight and go through that process unless you show them a video of your app, and if they like the video, then maybe they'll check it out. So having a video, even if it's not professional, even if it just shows the functionality of your app, that's huge if you want to cold call people. Website, press kit. So what is a press kit? Press kit is a file, usually on the internet somewhere, that you link to from your emails, and it includes everything that makes it easy to write an article. So you got to think about things from their perspective. They're trying to find great apps. They're trying to find great stories. And it's going to help them out a lot if you include a folder that has the app icon, screenshots, maybe promo screenshots that look really nice, because they can just plop those in there. They don't have to create their own. Things like that just make it, maybe you have in there a PDF that kind of talks about like a review guide. That's what we've used in our apps, is just kind of walk through the app, tell them the major features, tell them why it's a story, help them create a story, tell them what the story is. Because that's what journalists want to do. They want to tell stories, and you got to be able to do that. And so the press kit is a really good way to just make it easy for people to write about it. And that might take them over the edge between not writing about your product and writing about it. Include a promo code if you can, if your app's out, or if your app has a promo codes available. Pitch Perfect is a great book if you want to learn more about pitching and these kind of email pitches and that kind of thing. It's written by a friend of mine, Erica Sadoun, Steve Sand, and they're writers for TUAW, which is one of the most popular Apple blogs. And actually, they generate, if you get on TUAW, it generates a ton of traffic. Actually, we've been on Fox News, we've been on a number of major things, Wall Street Journal, that kind of thing. TUAW actually gives you more downloads than those. So they're definitely, you want to get on the site. But this was written by TUAW writers. So they'll tell you what they want to hear. So this book's great. All right, the Holy Grail. How to get featured by Apple. A lot of people will say it's magic, it's luck, whatever. I don't believe that, because every single one of my apps has been featured by Apple prominently. And so there's definitely things that you can do to increase your chances. So here's 6 ways to get featured by Apple. These kind of these aren't guarantees, but they'll help your chances. So create a unique app with exceptional design polish. That's the base. That's the baseline. They're simply not going to feature apps that aren't great. So that's, well, there's a few cases where there's big brands and they feature their apps because they're big brands. But most of the time, if you're an indie developer, you've got to build a really great app to do that. So that's the base. And focus on the design and the polish, because that's what Apple likes to see. Utilize technologies that Apple is trying to push. So it makes sense, right? They're trying to feature apps that show off their new technologies. Okay, iOS 8 comes out. A million new technologies that you can utilize as a developer and have a chance to get featured. So that's one of the reasons that we decided to really work hard on creating a widget in time for iOS 8 for hours. We created one of those widgets for the notification center, completely new feature, and they featured a lot of the apps that had widgets. The iOS 8 update that we had actually got like around half the downloads of our launch. So it was another big boost. And a lot of that was because we utilized a unique feature that just came out. So if you want to get featured by Apple, that's a great way to do it. Utilize these new features, whether it's a new hardware feature, a new software feature in the new iOS. Apple likes to see apps that utilize those and show them off in unique ways. And like if it's something that this new sensor allows you to do that you've never been able to do before, that's the kind of stuff Apple features. Make a big marketing splash yourself. So Apple helps those who help themselves, right? Well, let me just kind of explain to you how it works at Apple, how the feature stuff works. And this isn't really public. Anyway, this is stuff not a whole lot of people know about. But the structure, as I understand it, is they've got kind of the evangelist team, which you might have met some of them at WWDC. They're all over. They're the guys who give the talks and go out to New York and give the tech talks and things like that. The evangelism team. They're like developers and designers who can actually talk to people and are very social. So it's good to know them because they've got access to the other teams that I'm going to talk about. So the second level, which is kind of the second, or you really want to know these guys eventually, is the App Store management team. So they'll be like the App Store editor or the App Store manager of business and productivity and whatever categories. They kind of cover different categories. There's different App Store managers for different regions, like US, Europe, and things like that. You want, if possible, to know these people. And that can sometimes happen organically as your apps become popular. Sometimes they'll reach out to you and that kind of thing. And also sometimes they show up at WWDC. And then the final level, which is the level that Apple just like protects. Almost nobody knows these people personally. That is the App Store editorial team. We've only met with one of these people once, and it's like really rare. Like I know a ton of people at Apple, but it's rare that you actually know someone on the editorial team. They kind of keep them close to the vest because they don't want them to be influenced by people, and they just what this team does is they go out and look for apps. Like they look for apps to feature. They are trying to find the best apps. So it's not that Apple is like just only listening to or just kind of it's just the popular developers that get featured. There is a team at Apple that goes out and tries to find great apps. So how do you get noticed by this team? One is if you know people on the other teams, that they have access to the editorial team, so they oftentimes reference apps. So if you know an App Store manager, they might reference your app to the editorial team. But more realistically, before you know anybody at Apple, you get noticed by being in places where people look for apps. So people look for apps on TUAW. I know for a fact that there are people at Apple that read TUAW, okay, looking for apps. So by being on these sites, and not just being on one, but if they see your app all over the map on different sites that they go to, they're like, oh, maybe we should feature this app. It's kind of a thing. And also, they probably look at downloads as well, what apps are kind of charting. things like that. And so that's how you can get noticed, is you make your own splash, and then Apple will make you a bigger splash. So create great-looking app preview and screenshots. You know, Apple wants to send people to great-looking storefronts. You know, it's like you don't want to send a customer, or you know, as a business, I don't want to send or refer my customers to another business that just is a shoddy storefront. You want to make so you want to give Apple reasons to feature you. So make your app preview really nice, your screenshots really nice. Spend a lot of time to just don't be sloppy on that. Localize. There's lots of apps, but not too many apps localize. That means that they translate the app into the different languages. They translate the description and tags into the different languages. And so if you want it, you can get featured more internationally if you localize. And that can be a way to kind of narrow down, not be competing with all the million apps out there. And eventually, like I said, know people. Like, so like for me, I don't have to do all these other things because I've been in touch with Apple and we talk all the time. But that takes time. That takes time to develop that relationship. Okay. 4 ways to not get featured. So keep in mind, these are ways not to get featured. These are not things I'm telling you to do. Create a mediocre app. So there's lots of good apps out there, but they're not great. They're mediocre. Apple's not going to feature a mediocre app unless it's by a brand that they want to impress somehow. They really care about design, like I mentioned earlier. So it's kind of the inverse of the first point in my last slide. Have a sloppy App Store page. So don't like I said, don't make your App Store page sloppy. I had actually experience of this just a few days ago, actually, because I was emailing an App Store editor about like why didn't ours get featured in like internationally, because we had just localized. And he was like, well, the App Store editors over there probably were like, because we didn't localize our screenshots. And we also, because of some fluke, we only had one screenshot for the iPhone 6 and the iPhone 6 Plus, just because some technical fluke. And so they're like, you know, they probably didn't feature it for that reason. So it's the App Store page. It matters. They want to send users to apps that have a great-looking App Store page. So you have an App Store page with just one screenshot and it's not localized to the country, maybe the App Store editor is like, I'm not sending people there. So another thing is optimizing for the latest operating system or device. If you think that you can get your app featured, it comes out after the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus come out, and it's not all layout out, and it's not going to work on iPhone 6 and 6 Plus very well. It's going to be blown up. Don't think your app's going to get featured by Apple. It's not. They want to see apps that at least are up to the standard of the latest technologies. So iOS 8, you know, the latest Apple devices. You want to make sure you cover those when you release an app. So when Apple asks you to do something, well, it says don't do it. That's how you not get featured. Sometimes Apple will do stuff that doesn't really make sense to you. And often the case, it's better just to follow what they ask for. Whether it's changing your app name to not include a certain key, or whatever it is, they'll change. They'll ask you for crazy stuff sometimes. But usually, unless it's critical, you just do it. So, but the big takeaway, like I said, is you've got to make your own splash, and Apple will make you a bigger splash through featuring you. And I can tell you, it's like getting featured by Apple is, especially on the homepage. Now they've got these different feature sections, so that you can get featured like in the business section or the productivity section, and those are great. Getting featured on the homepage is really hard these days, but it sends a ton of traffic, a lot more than Fox News and TechCrunch and all those combined. So definitely worth trying. So once your app is out there, you've got the launch over with. Maybe it did really well. Hopefully it got really high, but inevitably it's going to go down. Hopefully it lands kind of organically in a nice place on the App Store. So some things you can do to sustain marketing is big updates. Like I said, if you can launch in blasts this is they have kind of marketing blasts. That's really great because you get your app high on the charts. So if you can consolidate some of your big features into one release and make a huge deal about it with the press and with Apple and everything, and get it featured again, get it featured in all these other places again, it's kind of like having another launch. That's great if you can do that. App Store optimization. This is a huge topic. I can't really get into it. It's basically how do you optimize your keywords and your title and everything so that users find your app when they're searching for it or when they're searching for apps like yours. And this is, I think there was a TechCrunch article that came out recently. I think it said that 50% of app downloads come from search. And I think that's what it said. That's kind of like, yeah, App Store optimization is pretty important. That's how you get those sustained downloads, or a big part of it. And also you can do SEO. So your website, maybe you have a blog on it and things like that, so people find your app through Google, things like that. Localize. It's another good way to kind of grow your market and sustain that market in other countries other than the US. Also, those are smaller markets, so when they get an app that's localized, they often jump on it. And then building a fan base. This is what you want to do in the long run. Is you build up your email list, build up a fan base to where when you're launching a new app and when you're launching updates, it's not just going out to a few people, but it's going out to this huge fan base that you've built up, maybe 1,000 users, 10,000 users, 100,000 users. That's also how you can kind of sustain your app business, or a good way to sustain and keep releasing great, successful apps. So that was it on marketing. Go out, make a dent in the universe. It's such a crazy opportunity that we have as developers that we can compete with the biggest brands out there and actually win sometimes. We can build apps that really affect people's lives. It's really pretty incredible. Like, there's not too many places or businesses that you can be in. We were just talking about this, that that people send you emails saying this app changed my life. Like, it's pretty incredible to be able to do this. And so go out, make a dent in the universe. If you want to hear more about this kind of stuff, kind of the non-technical aspects of building apps, I co-authored a book with Nathan Barry called The App Design Handbook. That's been out for a while. And that kind of covers a lot of design aspects, some of also marketing aspects. But this is something I really want to push. You didn't think I was going to leave without marketing to you, right? It's an app-making course. So basically goes through all the non-technical aspects of making apps in a very detailed way. So it's kind of like this talk blown up like crazy with actionable to-dos at each step and things like that. And so that's coming out in probably a week or two. So I'm kind of promoting that right now. So yeah, that's it. Thanks so much for listening. I don't know if you want to do any questions right now or just save that for the...
Yeah, go for it. Yeah,
okay.
Good question. What tools do you recommend for both email lists and your launch page? Is it like Longterm or any of those, or do you just kind of roll it out?
For emails, I use MailChimp. I think Campaign Monitor is probably good too. There's different ones. Actually, Nathan Barry has one called ConvertKit, and I think that's kind of more for marketing and if you want to do like content marketing, where you're kind of talking about stuff and you're kind of presenting yourself as an expert on something, and you're sending them content over time that kind of drip content to them. But I use MailChimp. It's been pretty good. And for the app promo pages themselves, it's pretty simple usually if you know HTML, and we usually just design them ourselves and throw a page up there. But there are some good, if you don't want to design it, you just want a pretty page. You mentioned one of them, I forgot what it was.
Launchrock. For Presskit, actually, there's an indie game company called Blamebeer, and they got tired of doing Presskit, so they made a Presskit for indie game developers who works really well for
nice.
app developers.
Awesome. Yeah, so
So the company's called Blamebeer, Blambeer. They've made some popular indie games, but they have a Presskit open source package. It's a website that like plug in your content here, here, and here, and it's a HTML website with all the things you're talking about. Just
Awesome.
give someone.
Perfect.
You placed a big emphasis on making sure that you localize content not only within the app but also within the App Store.
Right.
That results in a big task of generating all those screenshots
Yep.
of various devices for all of your stores. What tools are you using to help?
Oh my goodness. Well, for this last one, ours was, well, we localized languages, but somebody else did. No, I did that too. Brute forcing it was how I did it the last couple times, which takes a lot of time. Especially if you have words in your screenshot that are separate from like the app screenshot. But actually, this last time I just have words for the English version on top, and then I have the app screenshot. But for the localized versions, we just took screenshots of the app in the different languages, rather than having the whole marketing copy as well. So that saves some time. There are, I think, actually, I was talking to one of the developers we work with on ours. He was saying that I think you can use, there's a tool in Xcode. Does anybody know what I'm talking about? There's a UI automation. Yeah, that's what it was. Can you say something on that? Do you know what? Yeah, I haven't looked at it yet myself, so I can't tell you a whole lot about it. But I think there is a tool that helps you kind of automate the task of basically going in your app, doing the tasks, and taking screenshots. So I think there is a way to make it a little simpler.
Yeah, because that's part of that testing framework. Is have it take periodic screenshots.
Right.
From
So you can kind of hack that to do some work for you.
But you still have to manually kick it off for each device.
Yeah, it's a few hours of work. Yeah, for sure.
Because it is valuable. I just didn't know if you had a way to help.
Yeah, no silver bullet. Unfortunately, too many hours. Anything else? Cool. Oh, I'll be up. Take a.
I actually kind of have a small question.
Yeah.
You talked about a lot about like basically having been previous out there, they're going to maybe look at your previous work on the store. Is it necessarily going to hurt you if you have a previous work that wasn't as good as the work you're releasing?
That's a good question. I haven't really thought of that one. I don't think so. I think they're probably going to focus on if you don't have a history of apps that they kind of known about and they featured. I doubt they're going to like hold your previous apps against you. I think it's more about on the positive side. If you've had apps that get featured and you kind of start building that relationships, it becomes easier over time.
So like a positive relation, not necessarily a negative relation.
Yeah.
Do you have a group of people or tools that you work with for your app videos? Or do you guys just go out and
Actually, my wife did the last one, Mindy, back there. She did the one for hours, and that's been seen like 50,000 times or something like that. So that was pretty proud of her for that. So we've done ours in-house. I did like the one for grades, and it was terrible. But there are companies. Like I said, I'm guessing it's probably like in the 10,000 range to make like a really, really nice video professionally. But you might be able to find like a friend who's really good at videography or something like that. That's what I'd look for.
Seems like the design polish is extremely important. How do you know when it's ready? When is it done? I mean, or do you set a hard deadline? Say, okay, I'm going to polish it for another 3 months and then I'm going to release it? Or how do you
Yeah.
do it?
Deadlines are a problem for me because we're kind of perfectionists. Sometimes it takes us a while to release an app, but so I feel like we've gotten to a level to where we've made a few apps and like so we kind of feel like we have some level of taste and we kind of can tell when it's there. Otherwise, I would but we actually another thing we do is we show it off to a lot of people. So I take it to Apple and I show it to them and they give us feedback. And you can actually do that. Anybody can do that if you go to WWDC. They've got design review sessions where you can show Apple designers your app they'll give you feedback on it, and that's something anybody can do. So show it to Apple, show it to fellow developers and designers. So on Twitter, actually, that's one thing I often am very public about our kind of iterations. I put stuff on my blog, and we get feedback that way. Put stuff on Dribble. It's kind of marketing, and it's also getting feedback too. So I kind of often make stuff public just to get some, see where it's at. And sometimes I personally, if I go to WWDC or something, I'll show all the people I respect, like the latest app I'm working on, so that I can get their feedback. And you can get really good stuff that way. So yeah, showing it to people.
So you think that polishing it till it's near perfection instead of releasing early and iterating is the way to go?
There's a lot of debate about that. I think it does depend on the app. There's certain apps where like you're trying out a concept that's completely new, some kind of new startup concept or something, and like if the concept itself doesn't work in a very bare bones way, the concept's probably not going to work if it's super polished. Like there's certain apps like that, and so in that case, sometimes I encourage go get MVP, and don't it's okay to have a few unpolished details here and there. For our apps, we usually are going into categories with lots of existing apps, and so from out of the gate, you want to be the best, and if that's the case, and so often how we differentiate, there's tons of time tracking apps out there. How do we differentiate? It's mostly the design and polish. So there's cases where that's a big part of your idea, is making just a better app that's more polished, more better design. So if that's the case, then yeah, you need to really sweat the details. And in general, like if you want to get featured by Apple in the press, that's a big way to do it. Is to consistently release apps like that, and they're like, man, every time this company comes out with an app, it's like something worth talking about. Thanks.